Why do you suddenly think of your old friend when you smell a certain perfume? Why do chess grandmasters see winning moves at a glance that we wouldn't even notice? That is the power of pattern recognition. It's not just a skill, it's how our brains make sense of the world. In neuroscience, this process starts in the neocortex, where sensory information is processed and compared against existing templates in our brain. The brain is essentially a prediction machine, constantly guessing what comes next based on what it's seen before. Psychologically speaking, pattern recognition underpins everything from language to intuition. Think of how we learn to speak, not by understanding rules first, but by picking up repetitive patterns of sound and context. We are wired to find meaning in patterns. It's what helped our ancestors survive. Spotting tracks in the dirt, rustles in the grass, facial expressions of enemies or friends. Now let's take this further into expertise. Firefighters, ER doctors, and yes, even professional gamers can make snap decisions in chaotic environments that often turn out to be right. This is called naturalistic decision making. It's based on years of pattern exposure, so their brain is no longer just thinking, it's recognizing. Gary Klein studied this with firefighters. One incident he describes is chilling. A team rushed into a burning house and the commander suddenly shouted for everyone to evacuate. Seconds later, the floor collapsed. He didn't know why at first, but he just felt something was off. What really happened? His brain had noticed that the fire was too quiet, the heat too intense. These subtle deviations from usual patterns triggered alarm bells. Experts aren't just faster, they're tuned into the patterns that novices can't even see. From spotting predators in the savannah to interpreting emojis on WhatsApp, pattern recognition has been our evolutionary co-pilot. In early human history, identifying rustling bushes as threats could mean the difference between life and death. Today, we still look for danger, only now it's in social signals, traffic cues, or political speeches. Our brains didn't evolve to read spreadsheets, they evolved to read situations. That evolutionary toolkit, it still drives how we make sense of the world. As Sapolsky explains in Behave, our pattern recognition operates at lightning speed, sometimes before we are even aware of it. The amygdala, our brain's emotional radar, can react to a fearful face in milliseconds. That's faster than conscious thought, because evolution prioritized speed over accuracy. Better to wrongly fear a shadow than ignore a threat. This shows that pattern recognition isn't just about intellect. It's deeply biological, emotional, and ancient. It also explains why we see faces in clouds or hear voices in white noise. We are wired to be more cautious. Better to mistake a shadow for a tiger than to miss the tiger altogether. Or as Aristotle said, the soul never thinks without a picture. Our thoughts are shaped by patterns that our senses have stitched together over time. Pattern recognition doesn't just help us survive, it defines how we think, feel, and imagine. While pattern recognition is a powerful tool, it's far from perfect. In fact, Daniel Kahneman's groundbreaking work in behavioral economics reveals just how our brains can be tricked by faulty pattern recognition. Kahneman, along with his colleague Amos Tversky, introduced us to heuristics, mental shortcuts our brains use to make decisions quickly. While these shortcuts often work well, they also lead to cognitive biases, systematic errors in thinking. One key example is the availability heuristic, where people judge the likelihood of an event based on how easily examples come to mind. Another is the representative heuristic, which causes us to see patterns where none exist, leading to errors like the gambler's fallacy, the mistaken belief that if something happens frequently now, it will happen less often in the future, or vice versa. In behavioral economics, these biases explain why humans often behave irrationally in financial decisions. We see patterns in random data and make choices based on flawed intuition rather than sound analysis. For instance, the confirmation bias makes investors cling to information that supports their beliefs and ignore contradictory evidence, trapping them in cycles of poor decision making. A striking real-world example is the 2008 financial crisis, particularly the collapse of Lehman Brothers. Leading up to the crisis, investors and financial institutions believed housing prices would keep rising, a pattern reinforced by years of gains. This belief led to the widespread assumption that mortgage-backed securities were safe investments. However, this was a classic case of overgeneralizing a positive pattern and ignoring underlying risks, a manifestation of Kahneman's overconfidence bias and anchoring bias. When the house bubble burst, those faulty patterns were exposed. Investors who had relied on past trends to predict future performance faced massive losses. The crisis showed how over-reliance on perceived patterns without critical analysis can have devastating consequences. Kahneman's insights have reshaped economics by revealing that humans aren't perfectly rational actors. Instead, our pattern recognition system, while powerful, is prone to error, especially under uncertainty and emotional pressure. Understanding these biases helps investors, policymakers, and individuals guard against falling prey to misleading patterns, emphasizing the need for skepticism and evidence-based decision-making. Let's talk about gaming, not just as entertainment, but as a high-stakes exercise in pattern recognition. Whether it's StarCraft, League of Legends, or Call of Duty, elite players share one core ability. They see patterns faster and more accurately than their opponents. They don't just play the game, they anticipate it, move by move, frame by frame. In real-time strategy games like StarCraft, the stakes move even faster. Players must make hundreds of decisions per minute. Here, recognizing an opponent's build order, troop formation, or resource pattern can mean the difference between domination and defeat. The best players don't react blindly. They infer intentions from subtle patterns and adapt on the fly. In first-person shooters like Call of Duty, reflexes matter, but anticipation is what separates casual players from pros. Top players internalize map layouts, enemy spawn zones, reload times, and movement tendencies. They build mental models of the opponent's behavior and act before others even realize what's coming. Games, much like financial markets, are dynamic systems. Static memorization won't help for long. Victory demands real-time adaptation and rapid recalibration based on shifting patterns. Neuroscientific research has shown that gaming significantly enhances working memory, visual processing speed, and spatial attention. But perhaps more critically, games provide instant feedback. Mistakes are punished immediately. Successes are reinforced right away. This tight feedback loop accelerates the brain's pattern learning capabilities far more effectively than passive learning environments. Moreover, games reward hypothesis testing. A player might test a new strategy, observe the outcome, and iterate within minutes. This cycle of experimentation and feedback sharpens a player's internal model of the system, allowing them to predict future outcomes with increasing accuracy. In that sense, pro gamers aren't so different from elite investors, surgeons, or military commandos. They build intuition through iteration. Over time, they no longer just react to events, they begin to see the game before it happens. That's the true essence of pattern recognition in gaming. Not memorizing what has worked, but forecasting what will, and doing it all in the blink of an eye. Patterns aren't just in spreadsheets or screens, they are in life. The Fibonacci sequence in sunflowers, the migration of birds, even your daily habits, they're all patterns. Once you start noticing them, it's hard to stop. Recognizing life's patterns can help us understand ourselves better. Why we get stuck in emotional loops, how habits form, why certain relationships repeat. And here's the key. Awareness gives us power. Not all patterns need to be followed, some need to be broken. Pattern recognition is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it gives us speed, creativity, and mastery. On the other, it leads us into biases, overconfidence, and superstition. Speed versus depth, intuition versus analysis. You have to balance the two. Think of it this way. Patterns are hypotheses, not truths. Use them to guide you, but don't forget to question them. You know, someone once said that the more patterns we see, the more predictable the world becomes. And maybe that's what comforts us. But if there's one thing philosophers, scientists, and even poker players agree on, it's this. Certainty is a luxury. Good thinking is about updating. Pattern recognition helps us navigate complexity, but is just a tool, not a truth. Real skill, knowing when the pattern fits and when to look twice. If you found this video thought-provoking, hit subscribe, drop a comment, and share it with someone who loves thinking about how we think. Thank you for watching. I'm your host, Siona, and this is Code Neuron, dismantling the truths of life one neuron at a time.